What's up everybody, welcome back. So in this episode we're going to work on our ADS system. It's a pretty cool system because we don't need to make any actual animations for it. We can drive it through the animation blueprint, and we can also use it later to apply some sway or recoil or stuff like that to the weapon. So it's a pretty cool system. Let's get started right away. So this is the same project as we ended up last time. I did some organization with the folders and I improved my animations a little bit, but it's the exact same project as you have when you follow the tutorial. It just has a little bit different folder structure because I'm a little bit of an organization freak. Let's put it that way. So let's get started. So we need to add a weapon socket or a socket to our weapon. So we're going to open our weapon mesh, and in the skeleton tree I'm going to right click on the grip bone and I'm going to add a socket. So I'm going to call this my aim socket, and we need to position it right in the center of the sights of our weapon. So we're going to use this later to line it up with the camera, and we're going to use this for aiming. So let's make sure it's exactly in the center of our sights. Oop. So that's going to be somewhere around here. So when I have it in the center, I'm going to move it way back. So I'm going to select it and just move it along this axis and put it right above the where the right hand is going to be. So the reason I do this is because some weapons have the sight at the front. If I have iron sights, or if I use a red dot sight, my sight will be at the back. So I'm just going to have a general position where I put this aim socket, so the distance between the camera and the aim socket is going to be pretty much the same for any weapon, instead of having huge differences in 4 different sights. So as long as it's lined up with the center of the sights, we're good to go. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to close it. And now we're going to work in our animation graph. So let's open our animation graph. And we're going to go to the event graph and we're going to add 2 functions in here. So let's create a new function and let's call this set aim. Let's call it set aim socket. And what we are going to do in here is get the distance from the handgun to the aim socket. So we have IK bones on our skeleton and we have an IK handgun. We're going to use the IK bones to line up the sights with our camera. But first we need to line up the IK handgun bone. So we can do this by making a relative transform. So right click and look for make relative transform. And we're going to make one from the aim socket to the IK handgun. So first we need to get our character, and we already have that. So get character, and I need to get my first person mesh. So that should be all the way down here. Get first person arms mesh. So I'm going to get my arms, and I'm going to go get socket location or socket transform. And I want to get the transform of the aim socket we just added. So I'm screwing up already because the aim socket is on the weapon and not on the mesh. So let's drag off from the character and go get first person weapon mesh. And let's plug that in. So I want to get my aim socket. And now we do need to get the IK hand root from the arms mesh. So I'm gonna drag off and do get socket location or get socket transform. I'm sorry. And we're gonna get the IK hand gun bone. So both of these are in RTS world, that's fine. So let's plug in the weapon in the top one, and let's line them up like this. So I'm gonna split this, and I'm only gonna save the location and the rotation. So let's do promote to variable, and let's call this aim socket location. And promote the rotator as well, and I'm gonna call this aim socket rotation. I'm not sure what I'm doing, so that should be good. So make sure we plug these in. And we are good to go. So let's save this, and we're going to create another function as well, and we're going to call this set aim point. So create a new function, set aim point. And for this, I want to get a point in front of the camera. So again, we're going to make a relative transform, and I'm going to get my character in here. So get your character, right click and go make relative transform. And we want to get one from the first person camera, so where we want to aim. And we want to get it from the hand root. So I'm going to drag over here first and get my first person camera. And I can simply get the world transform. And now I want to get my arms mesh again, so get first person arms. And I'm going to get the socket transform. And I'm going to get it from the IK hand root this time. So IK hand root. Plug them in here. So now we're going to end up with the location in front of the camera. So let me get the blueprint from the character in here. So basically we're going to get the exact location of the center of our camera, and we want to put it in front a little bit. So if we line up the weapon with this point, we're not clipping into the camera, but we're holding it a little bit in front of us. So we're gonna simply split this transform as well. And for the location, we can get the forward vector from the rotator. So get forward vector. And we're gonna multiply this forward vector. So let's say we want to put it about 20 units in front of the camera, and I'm simply going to add these two vectors together, and this will be our aim point. So I'm going to promote this to a variable, and this is going to be the aim point location. And again, for the rotator, I'm going to make it a variable as well, and this will be our aim point rotation. Let's plug them in. And we should be good to go over here. So I'm gonna compile and save this. Now let's go to the event graph. And in the event begin play, I want to make sure we actually call these events. So let's drag them in. So now we only need to call them once, but if you have a setup with multiple weapons, you need to call them when you change weapons, for example. But in this case, this should work fine. And now we're going to work on our animation graph. So go to the anim graph. And the first thing we need to do is line up our IK hand gun bone. So let me see if I can show this. If I play right now where we didn't do anything yet, and I'll go and eject my pawn, and I can show the bones. So this bone you see floating right here, that's our IK hand gun bone, and there's two bones that's parented to it, and those are the IK hand left and IK hand right bones. So those are in the correct position on the hands, but we need to move this IK hand gun bone into the position of our aim socket, so we can later move it in front of the camera and make our ADS animation. So first we need to reposition this IK hand gun bone, and we're going to do that with a modify node. So in your animation blueprint, in the anim graph, we're gonna right click and we're gonna look for transform modify, and we can plug in this over here, so it's gonna convert it. And now we need to set up the bone to modify to our IK hand gun bone. So IK hand gun. For the translation mode, we're going to set it to replace existing. And we're going to leave it to component space, that's fine. So compile, and you can see if I plug this in right now. And I'll go and play it again. So where's my viewport? There it is. So eject. So this time you'll see the IK hand gun bone is positioned right at our root. That's a little bit weird, by the way. Let me double check. Yeah, it is, because we didn't plug in the values. So I'm screwing up already. We need to set our aim socket location in here and our aim socket rotation. So there we go. So now if we look at it again and I eject, come on. So now you see the IK hand gun bone move to the position of the aim socket where we put it. But the IK hand left and right bones are way off because they are parented to that bone and we moved it around, so they are going to keep their offset. So we want to make sure those two bones end up in the correct position again by putting them at the position of the hand left and hand right bone. So let's disconnect this and move it over a little bit and look for the copy bone node. So we can plug this in directly. Now let me double check. For the source bone, we're going to set the hand R bone. And for the target bone, it's going to be the IK hand R. So it's going to move the IK hand R bone to the position of our source bone, which is our hand R bone. And we want to, let's get rid of this. So we want to copy the translation and the rotation, so select those. And the control space is going to be component space, so that's fine. And we're going to do the same thing for our left hand, so we can simply copy and paste this node one time, link it up, and we're going to say hand left to our IK hand left. So now everything should line up again if we plug this in here. And we're going to have a look. So you can see the IK hand bones are connected to the hands again. So now if we move this in front of our camera, the IK hand bones are going to move in relation to the IK hand gun bone. So they're going to keep their relative offset. So if we do that and then make sure our hands follow the IK bones, we basically have our ADS animation. And we're going to do that by modifying our IK hand gun bone again. So if we copy this node and paste it over here. Now we don't want to go to the aim socket, but we want to move it to our aim point. So I'm going to plug in our aim point location and aim point rotation. And for the settings, we're going to make sure we set it to replace existing, so that's fine. Okay, so I think we should be good to go over here. So the alpha is set to 1, so this is going to be effective at all times. So let's have a look what happens now. I need to have my viewport up to be able to eject my pawn, so let's get a viewport. Oop. So now you can see the IK hand gun bone has moved to our aim point location, and the IK hand left and right bones have moved accordingly. But nothing happened because the hands obviously stay right up where they are. So now we need to apply IK to the hands to make sure they follow the IK hand bones, and everything is going to line up again, and we can actually move around our rig. So how are we going to do that? We're gonna disconnect this again and create a little bit more room. And we need to get the 2-bone IK nodes. So look for 2-bone IK. And what this will do, as the explanation said, it will apply inverse kinematic solver to a 3-joint chain such as a limb of a character. And that's what we need. So I'm gonna plug this in over here. And now I'm gonna make this one for our hand right. So I'm gonna set it to hand right. And it's going to be controlled. So let's see, we need to set the effector in bone space, and the effector target is going to be our IK hand right, like this. And it's going to take a rotation from the effector, so make sure you tick that. And for the joint target location, we don't really need to set that, but we can. Let me see if that works already. So you see this little pole target over here, and if you make animations in Blender, you know what this is. So we can move around the pole target and make sure the position of our elbow is better. So that's what we do with the joint target location space. So if we tick this little button over here, and now we can transform it. So you see, if I drag it out, the elbow gets positioned better, so you have to play around with it a little bit. And you could even make this a variable and drive it if you need very different positions. So for now, I'm just going to put it here, and that is going to have to do. And let's copy this bone, this node one more time, and we're going to make this happen for the left hand as well. So again, select our left hand and make sure it's the IK hand left, that's the effector. And we don't really need to do anything else except make sure that the pole target is in the correct position maybe. So let's compile and save this. So let me see, it's not, because we copied the node, so we want to make sure it's on the other side. So there you have it, 2 different pole targets. So this should work. And now we have the alpha bumped up to 1, so we're gonna aim down our sights immediately. So let's see what happens. So let me open a viewport so I can eject. And there we go. So you see we're in our ADS, and although we are still playing our idle animation, so the weapon is moving around, but it's working. And if I eject, you can see the system is working. So the IK hand left and right is matching with our hand bones again, and that's making the whole system move. And it's actually bending the arms accordingly, so it's kind of making an animation on the fly. So that's working. Now we can drive this alpha to make sure we have a nice smooth transition between not ADSing and ADSing. And if we go to the anim graph over here, and I'm gonna remove my state machine, and I'm gonna plug in my let's make it our pose animation. So we don't have any movement in our idle. So you can see the gun is actually dead centered right now. And it's not moving around, it's only moving because I'm having blend spaces installed. So that's the aiming. Let me create a HUD quickly so you can see it's actually centered. So I'm going to create a new folder in here and call this widgets. So here. And let's create a new widget blueprint and call this in-game HUD. And I'm gonna drag an image in here. And if you're using the first person project, you'll have the crosshair image in here, so you can simply use that. And I'm gonna make this something like 25 by 25, anchor it to the center, and then set the alignment to 0.5, so it's centered in our screen. Compile and save this, and make sure it shows up. So let's open our character blueprint. And we need a begin play, so let's add one. Now I'm going to add a small delay to make sure our character is actually possessed by our player controller. And then I'm going to do get controller, get player controller probably. And I am going to promote this to a variable. Why not? Player controller. And then I'm going to make a function in here, show in-game HUD. So let's create a widget. And we're going to create our in-game HUD widget. So the owning player is going to be our player controller. I'm going to promote this to a variable as well. In-game HUD. And now I'm going to drag this in and go is valid. And plug this in here. And then I'm going to say add to viewport. So I need to have the HUD selected probably. And I'm going to plug in the in-game HUD in here. And then we're done. So return. So if our HUD gets removed from the viewport, it doesn't necessarily get destroyed. So I can simply add it to the viewport again. And this will make sure it'll only get created once. So let's call this function. And that should work. So now we have a crosshair. And it's not actually centered, so that's a little bit weird. So did I screw up the HUD? 25, 25, 0.500, so that should be centered. So possibly our aim socket is off a little bit. Let's see, can I put this in a front view? So you can see our aim socket is off actually, it's a little bit to the right. So let's move it a little bit. Why can't I move it in this view? What? Okay, so I can't move it right now, apparently. So maybe I can do something in the details, relative location. So I want the x-axis to be 0. And let's make y0. That should work. So save, and let's check it out. So now our aiming actually lines up. So as you can see, it's that accurate with the aim socket, so as long as you put it in the correct position, you're good to go. Okay, so that's that. And now there's one thing we need to do, and that's drive our aim alpha. So we could do this by lerping the float, but I'm gonna make it a little bit simpler, and I'm just gonna add a small event in our character. So let me see. Let me create an input quickly. So in your project settings, in your input, we can add action mappings. So, oh, I already added one. So I'm going to use the ADS one, the right mouse button. So let me see, if I right click and look for ADS, it's here actually. So first I'm going to create a variable for this, and that's called, let's make it is aim button pressed. Is aim button pressed. And I'm also going to make one which is going to be a float, and that's going to be our aim alpha. So turn this into a float. So set our aim button pressed first. So set it to true and set it back to false when the key is released. And now I'm going to simply add to my aim alpha. So get aim alpha, I'm going to do add float plus float, and I'm going to make this something like 0.15 maybe. Now I'm going to clamp this, so clamp float, so it stays between 0 and 1, and I'm going to set my aim alpha to that. And I'm going to add a little delay in here. So I'm going to make this a really small delay. Let's make it 001. And now I'm going to check if I still have my aim button pressed. So I'm actually going to check if it's not pressed. So I'm going to do not. And then I'm going to drag off and do or. So if my aim button is not pressed or my aim alpha is bigger than 1, so I'm gonna do get aim alpha, drag it in here, float greater than or equal to, and if it's greater than or equal to 1, let's plug this in here. So if this is false, I'm gonna loop back to I'm gonna loop back to set my aim alpha again. And if it's true, I'm simply gonna stop execution, because either I let go of the button or we're already at alpha 1, so that should work. And I'm going to do the same thing in reverse for releasing the button. So I can simply copy this and paste it. Connect this up. Now make sure I'm going to delete the +1 and make it a minus. Float minus float. Minus 0.15 again. So we can mess around with this if we want to later. And now I want to remove the not in here. And I also want to make sure that I stop if I'm back at 0. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to do smaller than or equal to. Leave it at 0, that's fine. Connect this back up. And we should be good to go over here. Yeah, I think we are. So compile and save this. Now in our animation blueprint, go to the event graph, and we're going to create an aim alpha variable as well. So that's going to be a float. And we can simply get it from our character and set it again. Let's get the correct side. And if we plug it into this node over here, so where it actually modifies the IK handgun, then that's going to drive our ADS. So plug it in here, compile and save. Now let's check it out. So here we are, I'm back at my idle position, and if I right click, there we go. We have our ADS system in place, and it's actually working pretty good. So if I keep smashing the button, it won't mess up, it won't lock up or something. Everything works fine. So we have ADS with IK controls, and we can actually drive it through our script. So as you can see, my blend spaces are still working fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There might be one thing you need to do with your other animations. If you go to the animation folder in here, and if you set your lower, raise, reload and all those kind of animations, and make sure you set them to mesh space additive. So we did this before for the blend space animations. So over here on the left side, make sure you set the additive animation type to mesh space. The base pose is going to be the selected animation frame, and you make it relative to the pose animations. So if you do that for the raise, reload, all those kind of animations, then you can still use them, and they will have IK applied to them. So if you reload while you're aiming, for example, the animation still works and the hands are put in the correct position in relation to the gun. So I can reload while I'm switching my aiming and everything will work. I can lower and raise my weapon in ADS, outside ADS, everything is working. So that's pretty cool. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope everything made a little bit of sense. I tried to explain what I was actually doing. So I hope that came through. So thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.